today we are covering turkey nutrition and management. It's going to be packed with information. Today with us we have Jeff Mattocks. You've met him before. He is the animal nutritionist at Fertrell, and he came tonight to make sure I don't say too many stupid things. And then we have Baylor Lansden and Rachel Teller, who will actually be covering the presentation. They are the new nutrition consultant for Fertrell, who were there once Lisa left. So we are welcoming them today, and they're going to be hitting the ground running with a packed program. So I believe Rachel is going to be the one starting the presentation. Rachel, I'm going to share your screen here. And the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Ingrid, and welcome everybody to tonight's stream. Baylor and I are excited to be a part of the team at Fertrell and to get started to talk about raising turkeys. So we'll have a couple of breaks during our presentation that if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we will do our best to cover everything. So basically tonight, we're going to go over a couple of basic things about raising turkeys. We're going to first start off by talking about the differences between raising turkeys and other poultry. Some of you guys might have multiple different types of birds that you guys are raising. Some of you might be switching from chickens to turkeys and wanting to learn a little bit more about that. We'll talk about the brooder and spacing requirements, how to properly pasture your turkeys, the nutritional requirements of turkeys, and then some common health issues as well. So to start off, how are turkeys different or compared to other poultry? So first off, turkeys are less likely to find the feeder or the waterer within the first 24 hours without help in the brooder. So you need to kind of hold their hands a little bit. We ideally recommend trying to get in and visit with your turkeys every 2 hours so that they learn who you are, you learn who they are, and they get used to you. As part of this, we want you guys to kind of show them where the feed and the waterers are so that they learn things. Also, turkeys have higher nutritional needs when they are younger than other poultry, particularly in the starter ration. We want to have a protein level between like 26 and 28% protein. And Baylor's going to talk a little bit more about their nutritional needs later. Turkeys do need roost bars and larger areas to roam, since they do tend to be larger than most other birds that you guys are raising. Turkeys also tend to be more protective of their young and their own, and more aware of their surroundings. They also have distinct group calls and signals that can tell you a lot about what's going on. And turkeys actually really like people. And there have been a lot of studies out there that have shown that the more you interact with the turkeys, the more successful you will be. Again, in particular, helping them find where things are, learning how to talk with them, learning about their signals and their calls, and just having somebody to follow around. So what should you do for setting up the brooder? When you're going to receive your birds, you want to make sure that the brooder is initially at 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the first 7 days. And then after that, you can decrease the temperature gradually by 1 degree daily until you reach 75 degrees Fahrenheit or ambient temperature at about 3 weeks. You want to make sure that the brooder has rounded out corners. This way, all the turkeys are evenly distributed. They're not going to kind of huddle in the corner, maybe away from the heater, or kind of get lost in the mix as well. And for spacing, you want to make sure that you've got a half a square foot per chick to start. Increase that to about 1 square foot by week 4 and 1.5 square feet by week 6, if they're in the brooder for that long. For your feeder and your waterer, you always want to make sure that there's plenty of them available throughout the brooder, and that's the same for any poultry that you're raising. Baby poults should be able to find feed and water anywhere they look within the first few days. Again, the turkeys do need a little more help to start out, so you want to make sure that you play with the feed or the water to make sure that all the poults are actually curious enough to come and explore and find out where their food and their water is coming from. In the first 24 hours, you can also mix 1 cup of sugar per gallon of water, and that's going to help encourage them to drink. And then just like any other poultry as well, you want to start supplying grit starting on day 2. As we all know, grit is extremely important to the bird's diet to help them digest things properly. And Baylor's going to go and talk about grit a little bit more later too. So as you can see in this picture, there's plenty of space for those poults to explore. They've got lots of access to food. They've got plenty of space around the waterer for them to go and drink. And if you also notice, the feeder and the waterer are on that piece of particle board off of the bedding so that the birds are not pecking on the ground and hopefully not ingesting things that they're not supposed to be ingesting. So with grit, again, it's critical from day 2. And you want to make sure that you've got plenty of it supplied so that the birds can always go and take it as they need it. You can use yogurt cups, Tupperware, pie tins, anything basically, just to make sure that they have it. Again, the poults are going to be really curious and they'll climb into anything. So you want to keep their grit cups, their feed, their water at the average height of the bird's back if possible. That's going to prevent them from climbing in it and making it a mess. So in the brooder, again, we want to make sure we've got plenty of bedding too. We recommend at Fertrell to use peat moss. We feel that works the best. It's naturally antimicrobial, it's sterile, and it has a low pH. Plus, it also doesn't look like their feed, so the turkeys won't fill up on it and try to eat it when they're not supposed to. Also, peat moss kind of has a dual purpose. The poults will start using it as a dust bath within a few weeks and help keep their feathers conditioned and them in good health. If you don't have peat moss available, you can use pine shavings or kiln-dried sawdust as an alternative. And now Baylor's going to take over for turkeys on pasture.
All righty, thanks, Rachel. So let me start. Oops. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, so we're bringing our turkeys onto pasture. To start, in your initial process of taking your turkeys out to the pasture, you can use chicken crates, the things you would normally use to crate your layers or broilers around, and you can bring them out to your pasture. It's critical that you've started feeding your birds grit before moving them out to pasture, just like Rachel said, to help avoid compaction from the extra forage that they're going to be eating out on pasture. You also want to make sure that your pasture isn't too tall, so no more than 6 inches high. And you want to do this by going through and mowing a few spaces before your shelter, before moving the turkeys out to the pasture. All of your birds should have access to feed, water, grit, and roost bars in the shade of your pasture shelter. For predators, your turkey poults are going to be, before week 8, small and susceptible to predators. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of protection, whether it be electric or just physical barriers for predators before that time. After that, they're going to typically scout or have scout turkeys in the flock to watch for predators and send out a warning signal whenever the birds need to group together for safety. However, you're still going to need extra protection for your turkeys. Electrified poultry netting is great. You want to keep that above 7 kilovolts. And you should also have a space where the turkeys could come into and maybe even lock them up overnight. And if you want to go the extra mile and have a livestock guardian dog, then that's great as well. For your feeder and water setup, like we said, we want them to be underneath the shelter of your pasture shelter. So sorry, underneath the shade of your pasture shelter. You're going to need 3 to 4 linear inches of feed or water space, or if your feeders or waterers are round, then 2 inches. This will increase as the birds get older. You want to make sure that you have all of the space that the birds need to eat and drink at the same time. This is priority, so that if there has been a period of time where they haven't had food or water, whenever you introduce food or water, they can all drink or eat at the same time. Roost bars. These are very important for our turkeys. They will roost similar to layer hens. And you can just use the one by one beams for them to roost on, and that'll be enough for their feet to grip. For the spacing requirements for these, you're going to want to start out with 5 inches per bird and then increase by 1 inch per week until you give your birds 16 inches. The space between the bars in your shelter, 10 inches to start, and then increase by 1 inch per week until you have 20 inches minimum between bars. Or, of course, you could just start at the end of all these recommendations whenever you put them out, so you won't have to make any changes throughout the bird's life. All right, so again, we're mentioning grit again because the turkeys really can eat their weight in grit. So we have multiple different sizes. We have a starter grit, a grower grit, a developer grit, a big grower grit, and then a finisher grit. So you're going to need to match these grit sizes with your bird's development. So now we'll move on to the specific nutritional requirements of turkeys. And this page lays out a lot of different diets, but we have the highlighted diets as kind of the basics of where we want to start. So we have a 26% starter diet, and then a 21.5% grower diet, and an 18% developer diet that you would bring on all the way to finish. If you want to expand that, you can have a starter diet, 2 grower diets, and then a finish diet. Or again, you could bring it down to just 3. Or sometimes if you are just able to fit in a starter and a grower, you can do that as well. If you get all these different diets, you'll see that the starters, 28 to 26%, is a lot higher than we would typically start our chickens. So that's the big nutritional difference in turkeys. However, the nutritional needs are higher across the board, not only in just our protein. So in all of our micronutrients, our vitamins and our minerals, they're also going to be higher. And that's why if you look at a standard Fertrell diet, our turkey booster will be in the starter and the grower, and that's to help meet those extra requirements. So these are just some basic feed rations for our starter, 2 growers, and then our finisher. They're made with basic ingredients, and these are also in our catalog if you wanted to look them up yourself. At the bottom, we have the age ranges that you would feed a certain ration in either commercial or heritage breeds. So for your grower, that's week 1 through 4. For your starter, that's 1 through 4. For your first grower, that's weeks 4 through 8. For your second grower, that's weeks 8 through 12. And for your finisher, that's 12 weeks to finish, which is typically 14 to 16 weeks. All right, so you're already producing broilers, but now you want to produce a few turkeys on the side, but you don't want to buy an extra feed. What do? It's actually quite simple. So you're just going to take a 5-gallon pail. So that's your typical bucket that you'll have around the farm. And then you're going to put all of your 19% broiler grower in there, and then just add another 4 pounds of fish meal on top. And that will bring it to a 26% turkey starter. You're going to feed that from day 1 until day 28. After that, you're going to want to make a 21% turkey grower by just adding 2 pounds to that pail, 2 pounds of fish meal to that pail. And after that, after day 56, very conveniently, you can just feed a 19% broiler. I also wanted to mention that from week 9 or 10 on, you can offer whole wheat mixed with grit in a separate feeder, free choice. We have this on this slide, but you can do this regardless of whether you're doing this feeding method or not. The extra whole wheat on the side will allow the turkeys to amend their own diet as their protein requirements change. And because the protein requirements in the diet are the more expensive, this can actually add to some savings in the diet through time. All right, so I just wanted to look at the differences between the commercial and heritage breeds. So for your commercial breeds, you're going to hit market weight at around 14 to 16 weeks. And for your heritage breeds, such as the Bourbon Red or the White Holland or the Royal Palm, your market weights are going to be more 26 to 28 weeks. And as we all know, our commercial breeds have really broad breasts. They're called usually broad-breasted. And that's what people are usually looking for. For our heritage breeds, they're not bred to have those really large breasts, so they may be a little bit bonier, or they will be a little bit bonier. Our feed conversion ratio is also going to be quite different between the two. So we're looking at 3 pounds of feed for 1 pound of gain for our commercial and 4 pounds of feed to 1 pound of gain for our heritage. Average carcass weights for our commercial, 15 to 20 pounds, and average carcass weights for our heritage, 10 to 12 pounds. And obviously these differences in feed conversion ratios and final carcass weight is going to add to a different cost of production. So our average cost of production for commercial breed turkeys is going to be about $3.37. And for our heritage breeds, quite a bit more expensive at $8.09. And now I will pass it on to Rachel, who will finish us off with health issues.
Sorry about that. Now that you have your birds set up, what are some common health issues to be looking out for? So the number one disease that we look for in birds and can be a really big pain is going to be coccidiosis. And this is the same across pretty much any poultry. So coccidiosis is a protozoan parasite infection. The most common sign is going to be blood in the manure. However, that does not always happen. Typically, when a bird or a turkey has a coccidiosis infection, the birds will start to act depressed. They'll drink more water, causing runny manure, or you might even see them eating bedding. These can all be signs of a coccidiosis infection. Also, because of the runny manure, their back ends around their vents can be dirty and messy as well. So to treat, first off, we want to change the bedding. We want to remove the protozoan from the environment so that we don't continue to infect other birds. You can also offer raw milk. Their back ends around their vents can be dirty and messy as well. So to treat, first off, we want to change the bedding. We want to remove the protozoan from the environment so that we don't continue to infect other birds. You can also offer dirty and messy as well. So to treat, first off, we want to change the bedding. We want to remove the protozoan from the environment. So getting back, you want to offer raw milk in separate shallow dishes, and you're going to leave that in their brooder or wherever they are for an hour and let them drink as much raw milk as they want. This is going to help with their natural flora found in their digestive system and return their gut health back to where you want it to be. In severe cases, you can offer copper sulfate at a rate of 1 ounce per 5 gallons of drinking water, but you're only going to offer this for 3 days. Another disease that presents similar symptoms to coccidiosis is necrotic enteritis. This is a bacterial infection. Again, you're going to see birds that are going to be lethargic. They're going to be drinking more. They're going to have runny manure and dirty back ends. However, there is not going to be any blood in the manure. So you're going to treat this the same way that you would treat coccidia. Both of these come from poor brooder management or dirty bedding. So again, the number one thing that you want to do whenever you start to see these symptoms would be to change their bedding, making sure that they always have clean, dry bedding to prevent further infection. Another disease commonly seen in turkeys is caused by Mycoplasma gallisepticum, which is a bacteria, and it commonly leads to infectious sinusitis in birds. Symptoms look like the common cold, so your turkeys are going to be sneezing, have runny eyes, nasal discharge, and a swollen face. This does tend to be more common in turkeys than chickens. However, chickens can get this as well. So to treat this, you're going to want to provide garlic water to your birds. You're going to put 2 cloves of garlic in 5 gallons of water and let that soak for 24 hours. And then you're going to use the garlic water as their only drinking water source. You can also use garlic tincture to give to the birds directly, and we'll go over that in a little bit. You can also give the birds vitamin E oil, and you're going to give them 2 to 3 drops per bird per day. The vitamin E is going to help stimulate their immune system and help the bird fight off infection. Another common question that we get is we get people calling saying that their birds, and their turkeys in particular, have blackhead. But in reality, it's really fowl pox. So the pictures that you see below are actually pictures of fowl pox and not blackhead. Blackhead is actually only able to be diagnosed from a necropsy of a freshly dead bird, where you can look at the liver. If you necropsy a bird that you suspect has blackhead and you get to the liver and it has these bullseye pustules all over it, then you know that you have blackhead. Otherwise, you will not know by just looking at the exterior of the bird. So what is the difference between fowl pox and blackhead? So fowl pox is a slow spreading viral infection of chickens and turkeys characterized by the big lesions and black spots on their heads and neck. So you will see outward symptoms of this disease. On the other hand, blackhead is actually caused by a protozoan called Histomonas melligridis, and chickens can actually carry this protozoa, but they seem to be immune to the effects of it. Although they may come down with some symptoms, they are not going to be the primary target like turkeys are. This protozoan can also be found in earthworms and in the environment. So again, keeping your area clean is very important. The protozoa causes considerable damage to the liver and the ceca of the infected turkeys, and untreated birds usually die. Now, both fowl pox and blackhead don't have a guaranteed treatment. However, we've been successful in treating both of these diseases with a combination of garlic oil and vitamin E. So what you're going to do is you're going to use 1 ounce of your garlic tincture to 1 gallon of water to treat the birds, and then again 2 to 3 drops of vitamin E oil per bird as well. We also have this turkey fixer that has been successful in halting outbreaks of blackhead and also stopping the mortalities. And what you're going to do is you are going to use this in combination with the vitamin E oil and the garlic tincture, and you're going to make this combination in equal parts of Redmond clay, black walnut powder, slippery elm powder, and cayenne pepper powder. Mix that together, and you're going to feed it at a rate of 1/8 of an ounce per bird, or roughly 1 teaspoon per bird per day. You're going to feed this to the birds for 7 to 14 days, or about 5 days after the symptoms have subsided. You can also make a slurry with this with whole milk to help entice the birds to actually consume it. The amount of cayenne powder in there will not affect the birds in terms of wanting to consume it, as they cannot actually taste the capsaicin powder that's in the pepper. So everybody who's raising turkeys and birds in general should have a home health kit at their disposal to have some common remedies available whenever their birds are feeling slightly off. The number one thing that we recommend to always have on hand is apple cider vinegar. This is great for putting in the water during high times of heat or stress to basically encourage the birds to drink and provide some added electrolytes to them. This garlic tincture that we've talked about, to make your own, you're going to put 5 cloves of garlic into a bottle of vodka, and then you're going to let it sit for 30 days before you use it. This will create a concentrated source of that garlic oil in it, basically. And then again, your vitamin E oil too. This is going to help be an immune stimulator and help get your birds back on track. So what are the keys to successfully raising turkeys? Again, you want to give them that mother figure. The turkeys really rely on you to show them what they're doing, where things are, how to act, and what to do. So again, when you start out with your turkeys, you want to be visiting them at least every 2 hours, spend a good 15 minutes with them, just walk around, sit with them. If you've got any young children at home, have them go and, have a tea party with the birds and their brooder. Both your children and your turkeys will love it. The turkeys learn best when they've got someone to teach them, because lots of things aren't natural to them. You want to spend lots of time with them. Again, the more time you can spend with them and have eyes on them, the quicker you can tell if something's not right with your bird. You guys are, the line of defense between the bird and everything else. So if you can't explain what's happening, then we can't help you try to problem solve and come up with solutions. So you guys are going to be your best advocate for your animals here by knowing what's normal and what's not normal. Work with their natural behaviors. Again, turkeys are incredibly curious. They're going to follow you around. They're probably going to get in your way. They're going to get under your feet and they're going to trip you up. But that's what they do. That's what they like. And that's how they thrive. So even if you let them help you and it takes a couple of extra minutes, it'll pay off dividends and in the long run. And again, you want to talk to them. Turkeys are very social. They like to talk and communicate with each other. And if you talk to them, they'll actually talk back to you. And once you start recognizing their calls and their normal noises, you'll be able to tell if something's the matter or something is stressed. As Baylor mentioned, once they're out on pasture with predators around, they're going to have scout turkeys, and you'll learn to hear their distress calls, and you'll know if something's going on out in pasture and you need to go and help them. And finally, have fun. Turkeys are the most personable poultry out there, and they can be a lot of fun to raise. You just got to put the time and effort into it, and you will definitely have a good, successful brood. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in today. Hopefully we covered a lot for you. If there's anything that you have questions on, anything you want us to go over, we are more than happy to take questions and provide some more insight on how you can successfully raise turkeys.
There you go. That was a lot of information. But all of it is true. And anybody who has raised turkey can relate to what was being said. I raised turkeys. I was a mother figure. I was a nurse. I was all those things, but they are so friendly. And the thing with turkey is that's where my first memory of Jeff goes back, if you'll believe it, because our first batch of turkey, we didn't really know what we were doing. We had looked for information, but not found adequate information. So we made all the mistakes pretty much that were outlined in this presentation. The first year the brooding temperature wasn't enough. The protein wasn't enough. We just had never done it. And people around us said, well, you just take like a high protein broiler ration and it's going to work. Well, no, it doesn't. And so the first year we lost actually 50% of our turkeys. That was enough to make you wonder if you even want to do it ever again. And that's when we actually met Jeff, who said, okay, this is your brooder temperature. This is a ration. And the next year we lost 2 turkeys out of 200. So that's the difference that it makes to have a proper ration, proper brooding, and to be talking to people who actually know what they're doing. And then it makes it very pleasant because, they are, when you get into the barn, they want to come see you. They want to come see what you're doing. They call to you. When they see you in the barn, they start talking. And if you respond to them, they actually keep talking even more. So you actually have a relationship with your birds that, you go into a broiler barn. Yeah, you're there. You're giving me food. That's good. But I'll be happy when you leave. It doesn't make any difference for me. But whereas turkeys, they do want to interact with you. So, I wish I'd seen this presentation before we started the first time because it would have saved us. It was to the place you didn't even want to go into the barn, or you went with your eyes closed, what am I going to find? Okay, not too many dead. Okay. Today we went through it, but it's a pleasure to raise them once you have things worked out and you know what you're doing. So right now I'm going to post the first question that we have. So it's from Caleb. Do you have any recommendations for beneficial crops to plant for turkey pasture? Jeff.
Turkeys aren't as fussy as chickens. I find that they like grasses more on the immature side, but they'll take to succulent grasses. You can use a winter cover crop grass, whether it's wheat, rye, oats, barley. They don't really care. They're just excellent grazers. I mean, they enjoy the legumes like clovers and alfalfas just as much as any other bird. I don't find them to be fussier. You know, depending on where you're at, I have people growing kale for them. You know, they'll plant kale or rape, and they love that just fine. You know, we did our test trials with buckwheat, and you know they ate that just fine. So turkeys are kind of easy keepers. They are not as fussy as chickens. Don't eat as much, you know, green and vegetation as a turkey does. So.
Yeah, the second year when we raised turkeys, they just devoured dandelion greens. We took dandelion greens to them before they went, and they just devoured it. It was to the place where you had to actually throw some dandelions into their pen so that they would go to them, and you could open the gate and get in there without stepping on one. They were just, it was like, I don't know, drugs or something. They just loved it. Okay, I have Tamara. I'll come back to your comment, but this is a follow-up question, so I'll put it up now. Would rape give an off flavor to the meat?
I have not heard any reports of rape giving off flavoring to the meat. It is going to give some flavor to the meat, no matter what they eat. If it ends up in the fat deposits, it will change the flavor of the meat. However, I haven't seen geese, maybe, and ducks, but turkeys and chickens, I have not seen them eat enough forage or vegetation to cause any off flavoring. That has not, you know, no experience with that happening so far. People love feeding them rape because they just dig right into it and you know, go right after it. And everybody's been happy with what their offspring, or you know, what their outcome's been.
Okay, and let's put this one on. How do you deal with wild turkeys?
I wasn't sure what Tamara was referring to as far as maybe the wild turkeys are coming to visit her domestic turkeys, and I don't know. You know, down here in the States, it's different than in Canada. You know, here we would shoot them and eat them. I don't know that that would be a good thing in Canada. So I don't know any way to, you know, when turkeys start talking and the wild turkeys hear them, they're going to come. It just doesn't matter. You know, if they hear another turkey that's new to them, you know, they're so sociable that even the wild turkeys, they're going to come in and see what's going on. And if they see something interesting, they're going to fly over the fence and join the group. So I don't know of any way to keep them out, Tamara.
Tamara, was that what you were asking, or are you actually raising wild turkeys, keeping them, and you're wondering what to feed them?
No, I know Tamara for a long time. So no, she's trying to raise turkeys, and she's probably having nuisance wild turkeys that are joining the group. So.
Okay, good. At the farm, we did have some wild turkeys. So before we had the white ones. Okay, here is the next question. Can urban turkeys have hay meant for rabbits?
Yeah, part of all of our diets for turkeys, when we have room to put it in there, we actually include alfalfa or, you know, alfalfa meal. The turkeys do very well on it, where they can't get access to fresh greens on their own. So alfalfa products are excellent for turkeys or any poultry, actually. Extra vitamins, extra minerals, you know, high levels of vitamin A. It's going to give you better pigmentation, you know, of the fats and the color of the bird. So I would absolutely allow them to have, you know, alfalfa hay or hays that would be normally meant for rabbits.
There's the next one. How much threat is blackhead really? Some online say they raise their chickens and turkeys together. Some say do not put turkeys on the same property at all, or even on land that previously had chicken for at least a few years. As a means to get our turkeys to find food and water, we put in a few chicks with them, but just for a certain amount of weeks, and then we separated them. It seems that there is a number of weeks where it is safe, and after that there might be a risk, but I don't know if it's a problem to have them together on the same property. We used to anyways.
Broiler chicks are not really an issue because they don't live long enough to be a carrier of blackhead. Old flocks of laying hens who have eaten earthworms, which earthworms are a carrier of the blackhead. Actually, the earthworm is a carrier of another protozoa it's a combination of things, but the earthworm is a carrier. The wild turkey is a carrier. Other waterfowl, ducks and geese flying over are all carriers. And, the blackhead protozoa can stay in the soil. Depends on who you talk to. 7 to 10 years is what they're saying. So it can stay viable in the soil for quite a while without a host. So it's, you can't, if you're raising your turkeys right and you're feeding them well, managing them correctly, I don't really see a problem. You can raise turkeys, where chickens have been. However, all the PhD scientific types out of universities are going to tell you that you can't raise turkeys where chickens have ever been because the chicken is a carrier that's not infected and it's detrimental to the turkey. But the turkey has to pick it up from the ground. So, discouraging eating off the ground, keeping your feeders at the right height, and goes into the management thing. Keep them moving on fresh ground on a regular basis. Don't let them, eat it down to bare dirt, are things that are going to help prevent you from contracting blackhead. The other thing, and we're noticing it this year on a wetter year, right after the after the turkeys go out to pasture, being out on the ground is new to them. So they're eating all kinds of things down close to the ground. And they're not, they haven't learned yet what to eat and what not to eat. So, but wetter years, you're going to have a higher activity level of those protozoa that lead to blackhead. So hopefully that helps, but I would not recommend living in fear. Raise your turkeys, have fun, manage them well, and pay attention to them, make sure that they're healthy and everything's going well. If you suspect blackhead in your area or you start to see birds getting lethargic, like blackhead might be a problem, just start adding cayenne into the powder or into the feed. You add it to the feed at 0.5% of the feed per, that they're, 0.5% of the total volume of feed by weight. And, that's a good preventative.
Yeah, we used to do that. We had 2 cases of what we thought might be blackhead. We added cayenne pepper to the ration. I think Trevor used to put, it was 1 pound of cayenne per ton of feed. I don't know what percentage that amounts to be. I'm sure you do. But we did that.
That's quite a bit lower. Now you're, instead of 0.5%, you're down at 0.05%. So it's lower yet.
Yeah.
More as a preventative, is what Trevor was doing.
Yeah.
Treatment levels are about 10 pounds per ton.
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay.
yeah, it'd be about 10 times stronger than that. But, yeah, there's some good articles on using cayenne, for the treatment of blackhead. Baylor shared it with us earlier, so maybe I can have them forward it to you. But there's, actually good written articles on cayenne for blackhead.
I do have here, just let me, I think you sent it to me yesterday. It's the link of, here, I'm going to just put it in the comments. right now. And you can read it. All right, so now let's go back here. How does raising wild turkeys differ from domesticated turkeys?
I honestly, I don't know, because I don't know anybody who's tried. Now, you can get what they call the standard bronze turkey, which resembles a wild turkey very closely. Now, there's 5 different kinds of wild turkeys in North America that I'm aware of, so it's going to vary a little bit, but a standard bronze will be pretty close. And look, the standard bronze is like a lot of the heritage turkeys. They are very hard to keep in, so you're not going to keep them inside of fencing or netting very well. And they're going to be all over the place. And they're much more independent creatures than the white turkeys are, or the broad-breasted turkeys. So yeah, and their feed conversion rate is going to be not very efficient. You're going to be looking at about 5 pounds of feed per 1 pound of final carcass weight.
Okay, then here's this one. What kitchen scraps should not be fed to turkeys?
None that I know of. I mean, we fed whatever came out of the kitchen, including meat scraps, to them, as long as they're fresh and not rotted. They don't care. They'll figure it out. So I don't know anything. People will tell you, like, don't feed them nightshades, like tomatoes and potatoes. Our birds never ate like raw potatoes. They weren't wild about raw potatoes. They weren't wild about tomatoes. So, they'll figure it out. I mean, give them whatever you want coming out of the kitchen. You're not going to hurt them. So I wouldn't give them really salty food leftovers. Poultry are sensitive to salt levels. So I think if I was going to avoid anything, I'd think I may not give them nightshades, but they're not going to eat them, and things that are really salty.
All right, and then I have a comment here from Carson. I've raised Merriams before and I really enjoyed them. I was just wondering if they were different.
The Merriam turkeys?
Yes.
I mean, all the turkey breeds are different, and they all have their own unique characteristics. So, I mean, the Merriams are wonderful if you can get them to, but evidently his Merriams bonded to him or imprinted on him, very, very early on when they were chicks, because, birds like the Merriams will tend to wander further than you want them to and be, more susceptible to the neighbor's dogs and other predators out there. So I'm guessing that, Carson spent a lot of time with them in the brooder, and whenever they were outside, probably stayed fairly close and within eyesight, of Carson. But yeah, Merriams are great.
Yeah. And our next question is, what are your thoughts on fermented feeds for turkeys?
2-3 day soaks are fine. I always get nervous about fermented feeds if we let them go much longer than that. I fear that there's too many risks that can happen because you don't know what bacteria are in the environment, or may have even came along with the feeds that could get started. So I'm not opposed to fermenting it, but I would say a 2 to 3 day soak with a mild ferment, and it would be good if you had probiotics added to the feed that can take charge of the fermentation. So once they get moisture added to them, they're going to take over, like your lactobacilluses, your Bacillus subtilis, some of those really hardy bacterias, because you want them to take over and control that, and form lactic acids, and start working on carbohydrates and breakdown. I'd really want you to have some probiotics in there. I'd be a little bit concerned about, is there any Salmonella, E. coli, or other bacteria in the environment that we don't know about, and giving them a chance to, start reproducing and take off.
Okay, now I have another question here, which is, what are common leg issues with turkeys? They can get leg issues just like chickens do. What are the causes, and how do you prevent it?
The only leg issue I really concern, I mean, they can get the same ones as chickens, right? So, they can get curly toe if they're riboflavin deficient. They can get spraddle leg if they don't have enough manganese. But the difference between chicken leg problems and turkey leg problems, turkeys are more prone to rickets. Okay. So, calcium, vitamin D deficient, and their legs will get bowed. They don't walk right. They're very wobbly. They'll take 2 or 3 steps and they just shut down. Right. They'll sit down and they won't want to walk. Right. And their feathers are going to get all ruffled. And I think a lot of times this gets misdiagnosed as coccidiosis or something else. But turkeys, a good turkey diet will have about 30% more phosphorus added to it than a chicken feed will. And you definitely want higher levels of vitamin D, and you want your calcium sources to be, above average, or you want to have a little bit of extra calcium in there. So they are very, because they go through that growth spurt. Their frame grows much faster than their body does. They're not like a Cornish cross that somewhat grows uniformly. Everything grows kind of simultaneously. So the turkeys go through, that frame. They frame out first. Turkeys are really thin and raily, and their legs are growing. They just look like ugly ducklings, so to speak. They just look, up until week 8 or 9. And, then all of a sudden the frame's built and then they'll start converting. So their demand for calcium and phosphorus is much higher at, in that developmental stage from week 1 to 8. So they are more prone to rickets.
Yeah, but then if somebody uses the Fertrell PNB, the poultry nutri balancer, all their need at the proper quantities, all those needs will be covered, will they? In a proper ration.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I don't want people kind of going out there and doing their own turkey starter feeds. But when we prepare a diet, we're looking at those calcium and phosphorus levels. For instance, a broiler chick, we can start it with 1% calcium and 0.6 phosphorus. A turkey diet, I want at 1.6 or 1.7 calcium, almost 70% higher, and I want that phosphorus level to be close to 1%. So again, that's 50 to 60% higher in that starter feed. In that first 8 weeks, we definitely want, more dense nutrients and more of them to support the way a turkey grows.
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of covered that a little bit, but maybe there is more to add. What are common symptoms of nutritional deficiencies? What are common nutritional deficiencies in turkeys, and what will it manifest itself as? What will you see?
I mean, with the turkeys, the big thing that I see is, like I said, it's rickets, which is calcium, vitamin D are the primaries. I don't see a lot of other, turkeys just intake a lot. We don't see a lot of common nutritional deficiencies in turkeys. Not like we do, not as easily identifiable. They're the same as they are for chickens, but we just don't have a tendency to see them. So a turkey with a nutritional deficiency just fails to thrive, right? It's not growing. It looks unthrifty. The feathers don't lay right, again, and a lot of times it gets misdiagnosed as something else, whether it's coccidiosis or necrotic enteritis, of course, anytime any poultry ever gets sick, the first thing everybody wants to do is give them Corid, because they think it's coccidiosis, and that's about 30% of the time correct. So, yeah, turkeys just kind of shut down and they hunch up and they just don't thrive when they have a nutritional deficiency. They don't have the same trigger, or they don't have the same warning signs like chickens do, other than manganese, where they have the spraddle leg. or curly toe, you don't see the warning signs. So rickets are what I worry about the most with turkeys.
Okay. And then another question here. This is more for turkey breeders. Do turkeys molt? So would they need a molting ration? And do breeding stock need a molting ration?
They should have one. They should have something to reduce the energy levels, right? And kind of help them through that molt where they're not being fed high levels of corn or wheat, less starchy diet, lower carbohydrates. And I'm assuming we're talking about breeding stock, somebody's keeping, somebody's keeping, but you're going to want a holding feed or a molting feed anyway, because you don't want them getting overweight through the winter before the next breeding season anyway. So, the holding diet for a turkey is down around 13 or 14% anyway. And you do want to keep the fiber level up just because you want them to feel satiated and full. So it's essentially going to look a lot like the molting ration that we've shared with people, in a previous episode.
Mm-hmm. And then what would you say is the number one mistake people make when raising turkeys? I mean, I have my opinion, but I don't have a lot of experience.
Number one mistake is they don't show them enough attention in the brooder. That first 72 hours, if you don't have time to spend with those turkeys in the brooder, don't get them. Right? And I tell everybody who tells me, hey, I'm going to get turkeys for the first time this year. I basically set them down and we have an education session. I said, look, don't buy them if you don't have the time to spend with them because they're going to die. You're going to feel bad, right? It's going to be a poor experience for you. You need to be in that brooder every 1 to 2 hours, run your finger through the feed and the water, talk to them, bond with them, let them imprint. If you can't do that, don't buy turkeys. Okay. Just don't buy the turkeys. It's not fair to the turkeys. Right. So just don't do it.
Yeah, there is what we did when we got our first batch of turkeys is put marbles in the waters because we thought it would be shiny. Somebody told us that if you do that, the marbles will be shiny and they'll go to it and they'll have the water and be curious about that. So we did that. And the next day, about 50% of our turkeys all had feed stuck in their bottom eyelids because they were trying so hard to get at the marbles that they were getting their heads in the feed and collecting it. So I spent 2 or 3 hours with soft rags and Q-tips removing all that feed because all of them had those puffy eyes and it was just full of feed. When I said I was a nurse, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. And you want to take that time because what are you going to do if they keep that feed in their eyelids? It's not going to go well. So you need to remove it. So what we did is actually, because they also seem to like to actually go sit in the waters, because water is warm and all that, but then they get chilled. So we took some garden hoses and we cut them to the length of the water base, and we put that in. It still gave some shine, but they weren't so attracted to it, and they weren't able to actually go and lay in the water and get themselves cold. I think you have to be ready the first year. And so anytime I see somebody giving the advice of putting marbles in the water, I said, well, if you want to, you can, but there is the potential that you'll be cleaning a lot of eyelids the next day. Yeah.
I mean, turkeys are great. Turkeys, I think, are my favorite farm animal. They really are, just because how much they enjoy being around people. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, there's amazing amount of crazy turkey stories out there going on. So
yeah, they're curious. They are curious. Not like they're dumb. People say our turkeys are dumb. They're not dumb. They're curious.
Not at all.
And that gets them into trouble because of their curiosity. It's like curiosity killed the cat, if you want.
Yeah.
But that's basically what it is. It's just being curious. But they're fun. They're
They
fun.
are. They are. So Ingrid, how can I share the screen? Do I just
If you
share?
click at the bottom to share,
Yeah.
click on that, and I'll let you in, and we'll see your screen.
All right. How do I select which one I want to share?
There's going to be a screen that comes up, and you pick the one you want.
Got it.
Okay, let's see. There you go.
All right. So, both Baylor and Rachel talked about grit. And so here's a picture of the finisher grit, the turkey finisher grit on the end. So there's a ruler there. So it gives you reference as to how large the grit actually is. And the one supplier of grit actually sells it as landscaping stone. And it's, half inch to 3/4 inch landscaping stone. So you can see the picture there. Just to give you a reference of the size of stones that a turkey is actually looking for. And this is going to be pretty much after week 10 of their life, week 10 or 11. Don't watch them eat grit. You're not going to enjoy that, watching them trying to swallow that stone, because you can see it going all the way down their throat, and you swear they're going to choke on it, but they're not. It's going to go down. So, and that's what they're after. And if you don't feed them grit, when you process them, you're going to find some of the strangest things in their gizzards. People have extracted 20 penny nails from turkey gizzards. I've heard, stories of people getting live ammunition where somebody's dropped like 22 bullets, 22, rifle bullets, and they pull those out, and, they're all polished up and still intact. And the other thing to consider is, in the other picture, is once the turkeys get big enough, just feed them out of buckets. Okay. The things you learn by accident in life. And one of my farmers that I've been working with now for 15 or 20 years, he goes out there and he fights the turkeys to put the feed in the feed troughs. And one day, he set his buckets down, and, he's getting the feed troughs where he wants them. He's moving them around, to get them in a new spot. And he looks back, and here the turkeys have surrounded his 5-gallon bucket. And just surrounded it, right? And he's thinking, why am I bothering dumping feed into a feeder if they just want to eat it out of the bucket? So what he does is he goes out there with full buckets, and they'll eat it about halfway down. If you look really close at the bucket, you'll see that the feed is about halfway down in that bucket for these turkeys. So the next day, he goes out with half full buckets, and he takes what's left over from the previous day and dumps it on top. Lets them eat it halfway down. So now he's just kind of rotating through the feed, carrying out, half buckets. A bucket will feed 8 to 10 turkeys. So you don't need to dump it. Once they get big enough, you don't need to dump it in a trough. Just make sure it's tall enough. Let them work for it. They're so curious about what's down inside that bucket that, feeding them out of a bucket works perfectly fine. This is a farm down in Florida that I work closely with. And now they're using 1-gallon buckets, 3-gallon buckets, and then 5-gallon buckets. And they're training the turkeys as early as week 6 or 7 to start eating out of those 1-gallon buckets. And then as they get taller, they just change the buckets. But the buckets are fairly inexpensive compared to regular poultry feeders, and easy to come by. And the turkeys love it. So you just work with what the turkeys want to do. And it makes life a whole lot, more simple.
They're easier to clean too.
Oh, way easier to clean.
Yeah. I know poultry feeders, it can be a pain to clean.
Yeah, that same farmer also, he uses real small tubing. He refers to it as spaghetti tubing. and he lets water run, just trickle continuously, and he gets more water into his turkeys. They are fascinated by trickling water. So he'll rig it in a tree or at the top of the pen, and it'll drop into a large pan. Some come up, they drink a large volume out of the bottom of the pan. Some will stand there and they just take turns drinking from this little hose that's dribbling water all day long. And he gets more water into them. The more water you get into them, the more feed you get into them. The more feed you get into them, the faster they grow. So we're getting 16, 18-pound turkey averages down as low as 13 weeks, right? So the more you make their life easy by feeding and watering them and working with their peculiarities, the faster they're going to grow. The growth potential is there if we meet their needs.
Yes. So are there any other questions from people attending? If you'd like to type it in, I'll be happy to put it up. So that study
Oh yeah, Baylor and Rachel didn't talk about that a whole lot. So I've always felt that turkeys really enjoy human interaction. So we did a field trial at Fertrell. That was Casey in the pictures that you saw earlier. We had two groups, and we brooded them side by side. Everything was done side by side, same feed, same water, same everything. So we had two groups, 25 in each group. We brooded them in the back office. We had one group, anybody could come in and play with them, handle them, whatever. We called them Thanksgiving. And then the other group was Christmas. And Christmas only got feed and water. The only personal interaction that they got after that first 72 hours was they got their food and water, they got their bedding changed. They didn't get any extra personal interaction. So Casey ensured that every day, above and beyond feed and water, that the Thanksgiving group got 20 to 30 minutes of personal interaction. She would go sit with them, talk to them, play with them, whatever. That's why you saw the pictures of turkeys on her head, things like that. At the end of that field trial, at 13 and a half weeks, there was 1 more pound of saleable carcass on those turkeys that got played with, right? So the ones that had extra personal interaction averaged 1 pound more than the group that did not. Now, the feed conversion was exactly the same. Okay, so it still took the same amount of feed per pound of body weight, but they did grow faster by having personal interaction, right? So they got to the end faster or bigger at the end. So if anybody wants, the field trials out there, we're happy to, we estimated at 20 minutes a day, if you person raised 100 turkeys, you could pay somebody $15 an hour to just go sit with your turkeys and play with them. And I think that would be a great job, right?
That trial is actually described in this book, Jeff's book, Pastured Poultry, Feeding and Management. It's very interesting what it does. But I mean, the same goes for people. I think people who have interaction with each other instead of being all by themselves do better. You thrive. It's more than just food and water.
Way more than food and water.
It's how the body takes it in. It's how it reacts to it. How, if you're more relaxed or not. If you're stressed, well, you're going to burn through it. If you're relaxed and secure, which, a turkey with interaction probably would feel too, its metabolism would be different.
Now, chickens like Cornish cross, they don't care. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference, right? But yeah. I honestly feel that there's only 2 animals on a farm that really care whether you live or die, and that's pigs and turkeys. Okay, they are both happy to see you when you show up, right? It just they like the interaction. So
Mhm.
most of the other animals don't care.
But maybe it depends on. See, there is a farm by Lethbridge. The cows actually come to Martin when he goes out there. They come. They want to get their head scratched, and if he doesn't, they'll put their heads to his hand so that he'll do that. And the same with his sheep. Yeah, and Caleb thinks that donkeys are part of the group of people of
I'm gonna have to go find me some donkeys to play with, because that's yep, that works for me. I haven't spent much time around donkeys, so I can't attest to that. But I believe him. I believe what Caleb's telling us.
Yeah.
But I don't think my neighbors would like me if I got a pet donkey. They're quite noisy.
They are very noisy. There was a
Yeah.
donkey at one of our neighbors' place, and I mean, if you don't care about your relationship with your neighbors, yeah, sure. But if you do, well,
Yeah. It's almost like having guinea fowl. They're just as bad, you know.
all right. Are there any more questions from anyone? I covered all the ones that we had here. So
I think we covered it pretty well. I think running through the presentation tonight helped answer a lot of questions right out of the gate, and so
yeah, yes,
it went well.
I think so. So
Yeah.
if there is nothing else, I will shut it down, and we'll see you the next time. We have some other projects we're working on. You're welcome, Amanda. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for listening to this, for all your questions and your input. It's much appreciated.